absolutely is time. And it's a very, very unique election cycle you can imagine. I mean, obviously, look, the last two that were essentially standing in the Republican side of the party were a man who had never run for any political office, and then the other man who just bowed out yesterday, Ted Cruz. He's currently holding his first ever elected position. So people around this country are sick and tired of establishment telling them what to do and not taking the chains off to let them live their lives. And it's very evident here in Arizona, where 15% of Arizonans' number one issue is they want an outsider who's never held an elected political position before and is also a successful businessman. That's me. I'm the only one. So I get that.
Yeah, you hit on a number of different things, and I think you're spot on. If you look at the last, not even just this election cycle, but the midterm elections too. I mean, it was that was seen as a rebuke to President Obama's policies and all that, where Republicans swept in waves, and now with like you mentioned with Donald Trump, so much of his support I feel comes from people who are just tired of the same old same. And I think that's the voice of the people needs to be heard, and just keeps getting louder and louder and louder.
Absolutely. You wonder if we're being heard. Are we being heard? I don't know, but I absolutely know that I'm not very quiet. I've got to tell you, Johnny, I have a loud voice. I'm civil. You're not going to hear me being rude to other people, but I think a lot of our elected officials have forgotten that they are servants to the people, that they are representing the people and not special interests, not party leadership, but they have to go with the voice for the people. And, whatever it may be, they have to hold firm. And we don't have that. We absolutely don't have that. And I see it in so many different ways and forms of government that John McCain has let us down when it comes to taxation, when it comes to our veterans, when it comes to our foreign affairs. It's just utter lack of either real power, which you would think he had power, to get good things done for the people, or he's just resigned to the fact that it doesn't matter anymore. I don't know, but whatever it is, I don't accept it.
No, and the people shouldn't accept it. It's one of those things where, John McCain is a prime example. Here's a guy who, he was a warfighter, he's a veteran, he's got a great story, he had service to this country, and that's phenomenal. But then he got into power, and again, 34 years almost, and what has he done? Time and time again, he's backtracked on his long-standing policies, his beliefs, turned his back over and over again on veterans, and I'd like to get to that in just a moment here. But this wave of quote unquote establishment people, they get in power and they're there for 20, 30 years, and I always ask, when these people come up for re-election, what have you done lately? And they always seem to come up with these great ideas right before an election. Well, where was that idea 10, 15 years ago? You know what I mean?
Well, where's that idea going to be in a year?
Right, exactly.
Because I've heard it so many times. John McCain's famous for saying, build the dang fence, or he shows up everywhere during election year. He starts to actually make a little bit of traction for our veterans in the VA hospital. He starts talking about the rights of the people. And then, of course, he gets elected, and it's crickets. No, we can't have that. I mean, we need to get rid of anybody who claims they're going to do something and then shuts up afterwards. If I see the person representing me actually fighting for me, even if I know they're running into brick walls, if I see them getting up and running into that brick wall again and again and again and again, I know they're eventually going to chip away at it and break it down. Or at least I know that they're going there and they're making the greatest efforts for me. But John McCain, I think he just sits in front of the wall and stares at it.
It sure seems that way. And, it's no more poignant than when we talk about veterans issues. And, of course, this is Warfighter Radio, and, our core constituency here is veterans from all over the world. And these issues are top of our list. Things like the VA, things like the epidemic of warfighter suicide. I mean, the list is a mile long. And John McCain, he's one of those guys that he has experience. He has that background of being a veteran, and he just doesn't get it done for us. And, all these problems under the VA have happened while he's been in power. And, look no further than him pointing to Bernie Sanders and saying, hey, Bernie was the guy who was getting stuff done at the VA. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
Right. It is ridiculous. If you don't mind, I'd like to talk for a moment about my contract, but I have a contract with America's veterans and their families. But before I do so, I want to let everybody know that's listening, all veterans, all family members of veterans, I love you. I really do. I understand that freedom is not free, and I do not accept that anybody that has taken an oath to defend me and my family from those that would do me harm domestically and abroad and then punish them has to come back after they have served, after they have retired, and have to ask for help, to beg for help. I do not accept that. May I discuss my contract just a little bit, Johnny, or no?
No, absolutely. I think this is absolutely critical, and it's one of the things that I really like of what you're doing.
I'm dumbfounded that I am the first candidate for any federal office that I know of that has ever had a contract with America's veterans and their families. I think it's long past time. I couldn't believe it when my Veterans Coalition, which is made up of men and women who have served in just about every theater of combat from every single branch, mother of prisoner of war, I couldn't believe that they came to me and said, Alex, would you sign a contract or work out a contract with us for America's veterans and their families? And I said, absolutely. And my coalition was a little bit shocked that I said yes. He said, we've asked other congressmen and other senators to do so, and they just ignore us. I'm like, why?
It seems like a no-brainer. Yeah.
It is a no-brainer, but they sent it to me, and I sent it back, and I said, not strong enough, and I think I kind of threw them for a loop. So I added a few things, but the bottom line is, if there is a problem, you fix it. I'm a businessman. You fix it. If something's wrong with your children, you either ignore them and it gets worse, or you deal with the problem, you fix it. You solve it. You cure it. With our veterans and their families, they are not getting taken care of. Now, I have a 21-point plan, folks. You can go to my website, Meluskey.com, and look under Coalition, look under Veterans. It's up there. You can always email us, and I'll get it to you if you want a copy, a PDF copy. We have probably 500,000 copies floating around the state of Arizona right now. But just so you know where I am with this, bullet point number 2 on my contract is that I'm going to be putting my offices, my Senate offices, in the VA hospitals. That way you know I'm not going to run, I'm not going to hide from anything. But secondly, which is not in my contract, which is important for you to know right here and now, this contract is not a campaign pledge. This is a life pledge. I don't take life pledges that often, folks. With God, my wife, and my kids. That's about it. But I've made this pledge, and I'll say it on air. I'll say it everywhere. I will fight for this contract until I take my last breath.
Absolutely.
You do it for me. I got to do it for you.
I love it. And, you're right. It's so bizarre that something so simple as, hey, let's make a contract with our country's veterans. And it harkens back to, Newt Gingrich's contract with America, which I was a huge fan of and big fan of his. How has the response been to what you're saying within the veteran community that you've dealt with?
Overall, very, very positive. Sometimes people will look at it and they'll say, "Well, Alex, could we add this?" Well, absolutely, we can add it. This is a true living document that can be expanded and made more complete. In some of our bullet points, we're a little bit loose with what we're explaining because we want to cover everything. And people say this is a very, very large-reaching contract. You sure you're going to be able to do all this? We're going to fight to get it all done. Absolutely. There's no reason why we can't. And Johnny, think about this. If one United States senator puts his offices in the VA hospitals, you know what that's going to do for the rest of the country? The veterans in other states are going to be like, hold on a minute, Senator, how come you're not doing the same thing Meluskey is? We can get this all fixed. There's a contract that, like I said, an oath that you took for us. It's just an outright shame that we do not take care of our veterans well. I had a man in California when I was out there for some convention was talking to me about the Spaniard war horses back in the 1700s when they were done, when they were retired from their days of being war horses. They were put out to pasture and treated like royalty. There is something wrong when our men and women of the armed services here in America retire and are kicked out the door and are not treated like the royalty they deserve to be treated as. Something is completely wrong. I know you're probably like me. Your parents taught you if you borrow anything, return it in as good a shape or better. This is outright disgusting and an atrocity that I have to see any of my veterans homeless, that I have to see any of my veterans not being loved or taken care of or not being told when they come home that they are loved, that they are appreciated, and we need to make sure that we're looking out for them as they looked out for us.
Well, that's a very appreciated sentiment, and again, it's not what we as veterans have come to be used to seeing. And there's going to be folks out there who say, "Oh, it's just empty talk," and here's a guy wanting to ride the backs of veteran issues to win an election. And so let's talk about some of the specific issues. And you mentioned putting your offices in the VA hospitals and everything. What's your approach to the VA?
Well, I mean, it needs to be a full evaluation of the VA services. I said that I want to take precedence, my office, to make sure that all veterans' cases take precedence. They can call me off the Senate floor, and my guys have told me, I don't have much of a temper, Johnny, but every once in a while somebody just really gets on my nerves. They told me, save all your Snickers moments for when they call you and there's a problem in the VA. I'll do that. Right. But there are many things we have to do. We have to review PTS and TBI protocols as they relate to suicide. Versus successful treatments of veterans from all wars. We need to really look into hyperbaric oxygen therapy. The Israelis, when one of their men or women in uniform are injured or harmed, and it's traumatic brain related, mm-hmm. they go into detail right away and work with them to make sure that they're healed. We wait until we get rid of people, and then we don't have the services, until everybody retires.
Right.
But we need to look at alternative therapy aside from just drugging people and over-medicating people and not looking at the real problems. Many other things. We need to reopen the same investigations that John McCain and John Kerry closed back in 1992 of the prisoner of war and missing in action investigations that we closed down. We don't leave anybody behind here in this country, I thought. I don't know what happened to that, but somebody who was serving in the 60s and 70s, you don't close out in 1992. You wait until that man or woman could be possibly 150 years old, and then you consider closing it down, but still leaving it open in case we can recover the remains. It doesn't make sense to me. Who is going to want to be our future men and women of our military if we're not taking care of our current veterans and our current men and women in uniform?
Absolutely. And you hit on something here that I want to go back to. The issues with the VA are so broad. We're talking healthcare wise with the treatment plans, the protocols, the overprescribing of medications, all of that. But then you have the flip side of it, and the other half of the VA, which is our benefits, and massive backlogs in every sector, both new claims, appeals, the whole deal. Do you have a plan in place to look at these things and actually, approach it effectively when it's already tied up in the government and they've been talking about it for years?
Strip it back and fix it. It's simple. You just have to get in. You have to be a loud voice. You have to be an advocate. Now, you mentioned something about empty promises or people just saying it because it's an election year. Mm-hmm. Watch me. That's all I can say. And most people don't know me, but if you get to meet me and you get to look me in the eyes, you'll know what you mean to me.
Mm. And that's an honorable thing, and I think a lot of people should approach any candidate like that. Let's see what they do. Let's find out who they are. But this VA issue is so massive for this community. I have this mantra on the show here that the VA is killing us, and really that's a broad, pretty bold statement, but I stand by it, and it's no more to the front and of everything as it is in Arizona with the Phoenix VA being one of these flagship hospitals for problems. And your opponent John McCain has come out last week and put out this new plan, this bill to radically change the Veterans Choice Program. He basically wants to give everybody the Veterans Choice Program. And there's been some mixed responses to that and everything. Where do you stand on that? And again, what is definitively what can we do to actually fix this second largest bureaucracy